This is part two of our conversation with Alex Friedman and Austin Schoen about working with, training, caring for, and optimizing combat sport athletes. We'll get a little bit more into the weeds on things here, but this is the second edition of one that came out a couple weeks ago for the part one. So if you want to go back into the feed to check that out, please do. To make sure that you get the full interview. These guys are doing some pretty cool things with a lot of science and thought process going behind all of it. So if this is an area they're interested in, or a lot of these principles can transfer over to so many sports, please make sure that you go back and check that one out and enjoy this one. Without further ado, enjoy this episode. Back to recording. So when we talk about like strength and conditioning for this group, I know we've finally convinced like the football team at UWL that during the season our goal is to just maintain strength. We're not trying to necessarily get bigger and stronger. How do you guys see that and what you've done to try and maintain strength, try and maintain power as much as you can during these weight cuts and during the season?
Yeah. And again, during the weight cut, it gets extremely difficult to maintain anything. As we go through the 8-week process that's outlined in the book, the UFC performance cross-sectional analysis, they lay out a pretty specific system where it's more of a daily undulated system for the first 4 weeks, and then we get into a little more conjugate system the last 4 weeks. And the last week leading up to competition is purely weight cut. There's not a lot of training that goes on the week of, and be that as it may, a concern in itself. But how I look at it with wrestling and wrestling team, and then in the 8-week training camp that we have, is you're exactly right, maintaining strength and maintaining the power qualities that we've hopefully built upon in our preseason or in our pre-training camp phases. But there is an avenue to improve and even gain in some specific athletic qualities. As you go through a taper and peak cycle and things like that, you can still peak power and work on a lot of more anaerobic specific strength qualities and bring them up throughout a training camp, even though we're cutting weight. So a lot of the times it's picking and choosing specific qualities, specific points that you can hit on and improve in a strength and conditioning session or even in a phase, and to help those things improve in the, again, short time that you have to improve them. Focusing on those things also helps to alleviate overtraining and alleviate trying to catch all and hit everything at once, because the athlete most likely is getting 2 or 3 practices a day and trying to fit in strength and conditioning somewhere into their schedule. So picking and choosing those qualities and then focusing in on them. You can do it either daily or with a conjugate system, like I kind of said, but picking and choosing those battles helps to reduce the overall stress and the overall training load on the athlete. And it's all compounded by stress of cutting weight, stress of having a potential fight that's, has huge implications on their life. So it's all about picking and choosing where you can hit your most effective minimal dose. So that's more or less how you look at it. And then with the broad overview of counting in and factoring in everything that's happening too, we like to, as healthcare professionals or as researchers and scientists, I think we like to, fit everything into their neat little boxes, categories. This is a weight cutting session, this is a strength session, this is a practice session. They all happen independently of each other, blah, blah, blah. In reality, all those sessions are compounding stress and affecting the athlete, at all times. So trying to make a program that considers all those factors and understands the total level of stress on the athlete, and then picking and choosing where you can induce, the correct amount of stress with the correct athletic quality that you have is a game that you play throughout training camp, throughout preparation.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. Alex crushed it. It's really just about, like, from my side of things, it's picking one or two things that you can make the athlete better with, and focusing on that, as opposed to doing that entire, we're going to make you a powerful, strong, and cardio monster. It's really focusing on just one or two things, and I felt like a broken record, but mitigating injury risk, because if you overload them, they're probably going to get themselves hurt.
Yeah, it was an interesting observation going from a collegiate setting where everything's on a time schedule. We got 100 things to do and 20 minutes to do them, right? That's kind of you're blasting it through the horse, being as efficient and effective as possible. And then I step into the UFC, and it's a completely different culture. Athletes, coming to a strength and conditioning session. This is my fun session. This is where we get to, specialize, or we get to focus in, have a little bit of fun, and work on one or two athletic qualities, and maybe do 20 things in those 20 minutes, and like dial it back a little bit, and really enjoy the training process. So that was a kind of a cultural shock for me. It's like, all right, we don't have to be up and go get them and, every second on it within this population or within this setting. And I think overall that leads to a more beneficial approach, but it's not practical in every setting. So that's why I think I've observed those changes.
I don't know. The one we did really want to hit on is, we alluded to it way at the beginning. I think we're slowly getting there where I'm at with some people, not so much the combat athletes. But we talked about this a little bit. Even when we talked about nutrition, Alex and I did to some degree, is, the concept of if some is good, more is better is so ingrained just kind of into culture. Yeah. Really to that level, with wrestlers, MMA, one of the best wrestlers in history for the U.S. talked about how he would train at night because his top competitors that's when they were training, because they were on the other side of the world. Obviously that works for them, but the sum is more, if some is good, more is better principle. Thoughts on that, I guess, would be, what you guys have seen, and can it be done at the highest level without that?
You got it.
Yeah, I got you. So it kind of comes down to me is it's trying to work smarter, not harder, is what I tell all my athletes. Is you can drive yourself into the ground, but is that necessarily the smartest way to do it? Especially because like I said, I work with mostly fighters. As a pro athlete, like, this is your livelihood. You got to be as smart as you possibly can to get as many fights as you possibly can. So one thing I recommend with all my athletes is finding a good wearable, the one that we typically use, and just to track your readiness and track different metrics, because having some sort of metric is always going to be better than shooting in the dark. So the one I really like right now is a Polar Heart strap, and Polar makes a really nice watch, and they sync really well together, and using that as our readiness score. And it's got a pretty high validity score as well. But really just whenever you subjectively feel like you can push more, but objectively it's telling you to slow down, there's a reason why it's objectively telling you to slow down. There's probably something going on. So really just listening to the numbers instead of trying to push through to get another workout in, to get another mid session in, to get another strength conditioning in. So just kind of backing off that I need to work constantly mentality.
Yeah, and I think within the culture, there's a huge view of, valuing and taking the principles from the outliers, from the Cale Sandersons of the world, from the Dan Gables, from the Conor McGregors, whoever you see, all you see is them blasting training. It seems like they train 24/7 and they, do everything the right way, and they, kill it all the time. Every session is they're dead lying on the mat, right? A problem with that, especially in the individual sport, is that we look at that and say, that's what I have to do to be successful, right? And so that leads to a culture of everyone deciding that all the time is the right time to train. And in a world where that simply isn't reality, right? You're going to wear yourself down. You're going to create injury. You're going to shorten your career. It's important to have an open line of communication like we talked about before, but also help the athlete understand what stress they're actually incurring on their body. So one of our assessments that we did in our athlete meetings when they came to the UFC is we sat down, we had them fill out a weekly training schedule. You know, what practices are you doing? When are you doing them? And how have you organized that within yourself? And very seldomly is that thought of as, you know, incurring stress, or thought of how can I best optimize my schedule. It's always how can I get more on my schedule? How can I get better each day by doing that extra session or that more? So what we helped to do and tried to relay this to the athlete is, let's organize your training in a way that we can optimize recovery and get the most out of each session, whether we grade it by intensity, whether we understand when your heavy days are, when your light days are, and when we should fit strength and conditioning into those equations. But it's a huge, I think, turning point that a lot of sports are starting to get onto, using exercise science and using an understanding of stress within the athlete to guide more and more training. I think combat athletes are on the tail end of that. I don't think we've quite caught on yet, because we like to train hard. We like to, you know, wrestle until you're soaking wet lying on the mat.
It's just changing that paradigm from a lot of my wrestlers that turned fighters, they're like, I would never go into the training room. I hate the training room. I'm like, that's stupid. Like, you're a high level athlete. You need your body moving the best it can possibly be. Why aren't you actively seeking out care when you have something in pain? So it's one of those things of change the mentality from, oh, I need to fit in another mitt session, to, oh wait, maybe a training, maybe recovery session is supposed to be scheduled in, and that's supposed to be something that's factoring into your weekly schedule. Like, don't look at it as an extra. Look at something that's needed to make you at your peak performance.
And I think, thinking back to the wrestling days at UWL, I think that's something that program did pretty well in hindsight. Where with December, January, we're, you know, overloaded, right? You're J-turn, all you do is train all day type of thing. And then as we get more to our championship season through February, March, we started to taper off. And I think having that thought process going through a season or leading up to a fight or throughout your training is, you know, the correct way to go about it, to understand how we can consciously control or consciously manipulate readiness. Because there are times that you need to train and you need to dig yourself a hole, but then there's times to back off and utilize the super compensation that should happen from that. So it's a different line of thought, you know, short term to more a little bit long term or overarching.
So I'm going to summarize some of these questions just due to our time constraints. So sorry about that. But first, the most influential, in quotes, like fitness purchase that you would think would be beneficial to this type of athlete?
I'm going to say Core 360 belt. I use it on basically every single fighter that comes in. Like I said, they all breathe like crap. And it's $50 you could buy online, and it shows you how to properly respirate and properly brace, which not only decreases any sort of injury risk in the trunk, it's also going to increase your performance, because then you can learn how to become rigid with your own breath versus trying to rely on your muscular system.
Yeah. I had a hard time going with this one, where we can think of, you know, strength conditioning, doing more, doing less. A polar heart rate strap is about $80. I think that's a great investment to understand the load that training has on your body. But I'm also a big fan of just having a kettlebell and being able to utilize. There's a lot of versatility that goes in with that. And so a little bit of both, maybe.
Do you recommend the cool shaped ones from On It?
No. I mean, kettlebell's kettlebell. Do what you will. Those things are cool. I like stormtroopers and whatnot, but
if you've got $200, do those ones.
Yeah, if you got $100, the Rogue or the whatever.
Book recommendations that you guys have found. We've obviously referenced this UFC one quite a bit, but other ones that you have found extremely useful that kind of go to this population.
You can hit it.
Specifically to this population, I think it's going to be a hit. Just psychological in the genre, The Art of War by Sun Tzu. It's a huge philosophical book, but it also outlines a methodology to a strategic attack and to things like that. And I think, combat athletes look at ourselves a lot like warriors or a lot like soldiers in a sense. So that book helps, I think, to bring it to the light of, metaphorically what it means to fight and have a strategy.
Yeah, and I'm going to go a lot more practical. I think it's a very easy read for anybody involved would be Ultimate MMA Conditioning by Joel Jamieson. That was my first foray into energy system training. And he breaks it down really well for the different combat sports and for the different energy systems, on how you can implement it on your own, as opposed to having to go find a super high profile coach to do it.
And then we'll use this one to kind of wrap it up, but take home tips or kind of the quick hitting version of what you would recommend to A, these athletes, but B, people that are working with them.
Work harder, not smarter. Or work smarter, not harder, excuse me.
Great. You messed up the line.
Work smarter, not harder. That's a big one going forward. And then just enjoy the training process and help your athletes enjoy the training process. So much of combat athletes and wrestling is focused on, grinding, working hard and being a badass and all this stuff. Like, enjoy the training process, get better, a little bit better every time, and pick your battles.
Yeah. Pick your battles is a huge one. My big thing would just be make some trust with your athletes. Really focus on building that relationship, because then they'll do anything they can. Like, I have all of my fighters would run through a wall if I said it would cure their neck pain. And so that's the one thing that's going to get you buy-in on the strength and conditioning and on the treatment side is just build that relationship first, and then everything else will fall in line.
Very good. Last thing is, where could people find you if they wanted to follow you or get in touch?
Instagram, strong_a.f. And then just shoot me an email, afriedman.strong@gmail.com. I'm not super big on social media, but I will respond to anybody that reaches out to talk to me should they want to.
And I'm going to be at Warrior Sports Wellness. That's the name of my clinic, on Instagram as well as Facebook. Or you can shoot me an email at austin@warriorsportswellness.com. Shoot me anything. I'm happy to answer any questions that come my way.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys for taking the time. We appreciate it.
Of course.
Cool.